Hello and welcome to Get Informed America, the show that breaks through the mainstream media box to bring you real smart news. Hi, I'm Dave Oakenquist, and joining me is the editor of Informed American, Mr. Rodney Johnson. Rodney, good morning.
Morning, Dave.
Rodney, I talked about this on Monday, but the story continues to go on and on and on, which is the situation in Texas. Now, I know you are just outside the Houston area, so I just want to get your personal experience of what went on during this week. Did you lose any power? And maybe talk a little bit about those your maybe friends and family who were affected by this.
Yeah, and so we're kind of at the epicenter of this here, halfway between Houston and Galveston. And so a lot of people without power, 1.4 million in the greater Houston metroplex out of roughly 8 million in the area, including my parents, my sister and brother-in-law, a lot of people we know, a lot of people in the neighborhood. The power outage ranged anywhere from us. We lost power for just a few hours on Tuesday night when the temperature was in the teens. But you don't know when it's coming back on. Whereas my parents lost power for 3.5 days. They lost power early Monday morning in the wee hours, didn't come on until late last night. And so, of course, ended up staying with us. My sister's power would come on for a few hours in the evening, but was off roughly 22 hours a day for 3 days. And so we're not set up for that, of course. And so what it means is you don't have heat except for gas-powered heat. We have a gas-powered or gas-fed fireplace, which is great. The problem is that a lot of the power generation in the state of Texas is natural gas fed. And so you have these competing interests. You have the power generation plants that want to use the natural gas, but then you have homes that want to use the natural gas. And there's only so much natural gas at one time.
Right.
And so balancing that did not work. And so then, of course, the big freeze, everybody worries about the structure, the infrastructure, their homes, and it's pipes. It's all about pipes. And so since we're not insulated in that way, because we don't get this very often, then the one thing most people know to do is let a little bit of water trickle out of your, the furthest faucet from your water supply so that moving water will keep it from freezing. Well, that's smart and it works, except when everybody does it, it means that the water levels in the water supply drop to very low levels. And then the water is moving too quickly through the water treatment plants. And so it's not treated to the level that would kill all the bacteria. So you end up with unsafe water supply, which is where we are right now. We're under a boil ban, or boil notice, as it's called, in our area, as is, I want to say 8 to 10 million Texans. I can't remember the exact number, but it's huge. It's more or less southeast Texas. And so they say that's going to go through Saturday, if not Monday, Tuesday. And so the problem, of course, was adding insult to injury as the temperature heated up a little bit on Wednesday in the middle of the day. Pipes unfroze. And then, of course, where they were burst, they just started leaking. And so you had all this leaking water, yet you had people trickling water so their pipes didn't burst. All of it meant that water was draining out of the system. There wasn't enough water supply. And yet, still Wednesday night, there were 1.2 million people without power. And so then they get a notice on their phone, hey, before you drink any water out of the tap, you need to boil it. And they're looking at their electric stove going, where exactly am I supposed to boil this?
Oh.
And then by Thursday, a number of cities just shut off water. They literally just turned off the taps and said, look, we have to rebuild the water level and pressure to a certain level before we can deem it even safe to get out to you. Or we're going to totally ruin the infrastructure here. And so then people get a notice Thursday morning that says, hey, guess what? We're shutting off your water and you should boil it anyway. And they're like, so there's nothing to boil and there's no electricity. I'm getting angry. And so it's frustration, and this frustration will continue. Because I was able to take my parents back home this morning, actually quite early. Their power came on very late last night. And so the place had warmed up.
Good.
And on the way home, before 7 a.m., I stopped by the grocery store because, it's been a week and we need a couple of things. And there is nothing. There is nothing. And so you go into the meat section and the meat coolers that are in the center, you walk by and there's, 8 million little packets of hamburger meat or chicken or whatever, dead empty. All of it's dead empty. There is no milk. There is no bread. There's no packaged bread. You cannot buy frozen. There's just nothing. And it stands to reason, of course. It's not that people need more food than they do when there's no pandemic or I'm sorry, no natural disaster. It's that the food people had spoiled. When you have 1.4 million people just in this area lose power for many days, their food goes bad.
Yeah.
And so then they have to do something. It's everybody restocking at the same time. And you add into that, restaurants are closed because they can't get water and they can't get supplies. So whereas you might normally drive to, Whataburger around here or something else, they're not open. And so everyone has to eat at home. So it's going to get worse in that regard before it gets better.
Wow. Now, there's been a lot. Now, the thing I covered, at first people were blaming wind turbines, which did have a problem, but it appeared to be a complete failure across the board. And so what do you think is going to happen going forward here? I mean, I would expect the hammer is going to fall on some of these companies, particularly ERCOT, who operates the largest grid in Texas. I mean,
ERCOT is a council, and they're the oversight committee for public utility electrical generation for the state. There's the East grid, the West grid, and the Texas grid. We are our own grid, and it's on purpose so that Texas legislators decided many years ago, decades ago, actually, that they would separate from transmitting power to and from other states so that they didn't fall under the Federal Electrical Regulatory Committee, the FERC, the FERC. And so we have our own. And so this is not the first time. There was a huge cold snap in '89, another one in like '93, but it's the one in 2011 that most people remember most. If you remember, the Super Bowl was played at Jerry's house at AT&T Stadium in Dallas in January of 2011. And there was a huge cold snap that came through and people had trouble getting to the Super Bowl. It was just crazy, right? And so after that, the national regulatory entity, the FERC, and a couple of others did a report and said, well, what failed? Because there were 3+ million Texans without power during that. And they said, what failed? What was the problem? And they said, the big issue is Texas power generators do not winterize like people in other states. I mean, like people in Missouri and Wisconsin, because they don't get the cold snaps that often. And so they don't see it as cost effective, because there are wind turbines that turn in the North Sea and it's clearly colder than here.
Yeah.
And so the point is they winterize those, they put in heaters and different things, and our power generators don't. And so they said, first of all, the recommendation is that you do better winterization so that you don't have this happen. And the power generators didn't. And the wind generation, it dropped from 18,000 megawatts to 0. And so there was clearly a failure of wind because the turbines just stopped turning.
Yeah.
Now, wind generation in Texas is about 20%. We generate about 60,000 is what they say, we're going to use in the winter. And it tends to be 20 to 30% because, of course, wind can gin up and gin down, with the wind. But they don't count on it for all that much. They count on it for around 10. They count on it for, 6,000, 8,000 megawatts in the winter. But they went to 0. And so clearly it just dropped off. What happened on the other side is the natural gas generators, they couldn't get the natural gas because it was frozen at the wellhead. And then there was slush in the pipes because we don't winterize. And then the coal and nuclear generators use water to create steam to turn their turbines. And they couldn't get water because they were frozen as well. And so, like you say, it was a general failure where the thermal generators, the coal and natural gas and nuclear, they lost 36,000 megawatts of roughly 60,000 in generation, and wind went from 18,000 to 0. And so they only count on it for 8, but it was doing 18,000. And so the big story here is the companies that generate electricity don't winterize because it's not cost effective. What's going to happen, of course, is after this, with loss of life and, horrible disaster, is there's going to be some move in the legislature to require that they winterize to some level beyond what we've seen. And so, it's not closing the barn door after the cow's already out. I mean, certainly this disaster's gone, but they'll be better prepared for the next winter disaster.
Just absolute craziness, and that's going to come at a cost to the power companies and then pass down the consumer.
Right, and arguably as it should, right? One of the things you notice, we moved to Texas several years ago. My power bill last month, my electric bill, was $106. And my gas bill was, right at $100. In the dead of summer, when it's 100 degrees outside, and I mean, I have, a decent house on a golf course, my power bill is around $300. I mean, power is very, very low here. And so I should be paying something more if I want that winterization. And I do. So I think that's where we're headed.
And you may want to be checking on your next bill, Rodney, because there's been reports in the news of people already looking at potentially thousands of dollars for the usage of this month. There's an example here from Newsweek, $8,000 from one person. Another one here, $3,800 from another company after their company told them to get another company, and that's apparently been delayed. So they're going to be stuck with. Rodney, we can have, for those, I mean, certainly didn't want to lose power, but for those who had power, now they can be potentially stuck with bills multiple times what they normally pay. I mean, that's its own disaster. I mean, not everybody has $4,000 sitting in the bank to pay their monthly electric bill.
Right. And this is the old thing of, personalized gain and socialized cost. And that's what we're looking at here, because the company you're talking about is called Griddy, and Griddy. And what their shtick is, and in Texas, you can contract with hundreds of different people who resell power. There are only a few people that make it because the generation plants are big and expensive, but lots of people will sell you a plan, free weekends, free nights, 2 free days a month that you choose, all sorts of craziness, right? Very small cost for the first 100, kilowatts, and then a more expensive cost so that if you don't use that much, you pay little, all sorts of games. My wife and I have worked at home for a long time. We don't have kids at home anymore. And so I chose a steady cost. I don't need games. I just want it to be this known cost. Yeah. And so with Griddy, what they did was they said, look, for $10 a month, $9.99 a month, you're a member of our little club, and we will pass through power, whatever the wholesale rate is. So if the wholesale rate is, 3 cents a kilowatt hour or 30 cents, you're going to pay it. And in most months, those people saved, a good percentage. So where I'm paying, call it 300 in the dead of summer, they might be paying 180. And in the winter where I pay 106, they might pay 42 or 52 or 92. So on a percentage basis, it looks great. The problem is power went from $3 a million, or 1,000 kilowatt or whatever it was, something crazy. So 3 cents, $3 for 1,000. It went to $9,000. And so the price, per kilowatt hour that they're using went from, $1 or $2 to $400 or $500. And to your point, they can't change because Griddy told them, please go find another provider during this craziness. But other resellers are saying, we're not taking anybody. Yeah. We're not accepting new clients. And who among us expects people with those power bills to be stuck with them? I, as well as everyone else, fully expect there to be some fund set up by the state or the national government that says, okay, you made a bad mistake, you made a bad choice, you never thought this would happen, and so we're going to pay your bill. And so personalized gain for the years when they paid a low cost, and socialized cost now that, it works out badly.
Yeah, a lot of gambling.
That's what it is.
Texas, that's what it looks like everybody lost.
Yeah.
Absolute disaster, and I don't mean to be flip about it. It is it's a bad situation, and hopefully, it seems like everyone's okay in your immediate.
My immediate family, yes, but everyone is not okay. They're finding people who died of hypothermia. We have a lot of people who carbon monoxide poisoning as they brought in a barbecue grill, a generator, anything. When it's 19 degrees and you've had no power for 2 days already, your abode is not livable. There were warming centers and they were full. People just literally did not have a place to go in some areas of the city.
Yeah. And finally, Rodney, as this was going on, Senator Ted Cruz has been all over the news for taking off to a trip with his family to Cancun. And he abruptly turned about face and came back the next day with some story about how he was just ferrying his kids to Cancun and he intended to come back all along. I'm not buying that story, but at the very least, I want to get your take on this. At the very least, this is a bad look and potentially damaging to his political career. What do you think?
I don't know how damaging to the political career is, but it annoys the snot out of people. So as the story has gone on, of course, here in Texas, this is the story for the moment. It has come all the way around that as things shut down for the week, his daughters were saying, hey, can we get out of town? And so it was a last minute trip that the family booked. He intended to stay for the week. And then as he's getting on the plane, people are haranguing him. And on the plane down, he decides this is a bad look.
Yeah.
He books a standby on the first flight back once he gets down there to come back. And he's admitted all this. The problem I have, everybody's free to live their own life, right? And his home was out without power. It's not like he was in some bubble and things were going well where he was.
Right.
And so if he had the opportunity to get out of town and get away from it all, it actually helps the rest of us because he's not one more person who's pulling on social services and emergency services and water and all those things. And by the way, he is a sitting senator. What's he going to do? He can't solve this issue. He's not working on it. And so what people really want is for him to suffer like the rest of us, which I don't agree with that. I just don't think that way. But I don't like the fact that he tried to spin it in a very positive light. Oh, I was just accompanying my daughters. I always plan to come back. And now it's come all the way around to, no, I really plan to go and stay. But then it looks so bad, I just decided to come back.
Yeah. As a rational person, if I could get the hell out of here, then I will.
It's just a bad look. And I think like most political storms, it'll blow over. I don't know why this one would stick more than others, but it's definitely a bad look.
Well, probably because the Cuomo story is out there, and they need to focus more on this instead of what's going on there. But as you asked, what is he going to do? I don't know what he should do, but I know what he shouldn't do, which is exactly what he did, was to tuck his tail and run. Well, that just about does it for the show, Rodney. I want to encourage everyone to, of course, head on over to informedamerican.com, where you can subscribe to our free newsletter, where you can get real smart news. If you're watching this here on Facebook, please hit the like button and share this video with your friends. And if you are catching us on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel, hit the like button. We want you to comment however you're watching. Let us know what you think about the situation in Texas, situation with Ted Cruz. Do you think it's blown out of proportion, or was this a really, really bad look for him? Ronnie, before we get out of here, we're probably going to touch on this next week, which is the stimulus vote. I think the vote is scheduled for next Friday, so we'll probably detail that more next week. If people sign up for our free newsletter, what kind of stories can they expect to be getting over the coming week? I expect it's going to be stimulus. What are your thoughts?
Well, the unwinding all the issues here in Texas is going to be a big thing because, like I said, grocery stores are dead empty. And so you're going to have a restocking story that's going to come along. And if we see people starting to get sick from water supply, that's going to be a huge disaster story that's going to happen. And then it's going to be leading into the stimulus. And the question is going to be, we have competing things going on. We had jumping jobless claims last week back up to 860 some odd thousand, which was not expected. But we also had retail sales jump 5% in January. And so is funneling more money into this the issue? Or should we say, hey, wait a second, it's about reopening the economy. That's the thing. Putting more money in people's hands is not the thing. Reopening the economy so that people who are unemployed can get jobs, that's the thing. And I think that's the conversation we're going to hear next week.
Great. For Rodney Johnson, I'm Dave Oakenquist telling you to get informed, America. We'll see you next week.
You've been listening to Get Informed, America, brought to you by the Informed American Radio Network. Please like and subscribe today in order to get new exclusive weekly episodes. Any questions, thoughts, or comments can be sent directly to info@informedamerican.com. And don't forget to visit informedamerican.com to keep up with real, smart news. Until next time, fight fake news and find common ground.